questions. Question oral. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Soar, government debt climbs, and Canadians suffer through the worst inflation in 30 years, many observers are saying Liberals have lost their way. Instead of presenting a responsible budget on Thursday, these NDP Liberals are going to be spending outrageous amounts of money on big, permanent programs, and that means more debt and more taxes. Is there anyone left on the Liberal side who would like to see a responsible budget, or have they all turned into NDP, closet NDPers on this side of the House?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank the Honourable Member for her question, and the Conservatives continue to ignore the facts. Our GDP grew for the 8th consecutive month. We have recovered 112% of the jobs lost to the pandemic. 2021 was Canada's largest annual trade surplus at $6.6 billion. Households on average have more savings than debt, and S&P and Moody's reaffirmed our AAA credit rating. Those are the facts, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, under previous Liberals like Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin, there was a sense of fiscal responsibility amongst their ranks. My, how these Liberals have changed. Even former Finance Minister John Manley said, tax and spend is not a growth agenda. We agree with John Manley. Canadians want a responsible budget that will deliver tax relief, not cost Canadians more. So will the Prime Minister listen to some reasonable people in his party, abandon his NDP ways, and present a responsible budget?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, after campaigning on a budget of a deficit of $168 billion, the Conservative opposition continues to flip-flop. On Mondays, it's do more for seniors. On Tuesdays, it's cut CPP. On Wednesdays, it's do more for small business. On Thursdays, it's block Bill C8. If the Conservatives want to help small business, farmers, teachers, and Canadians, they can do the right thing and support C8, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Sounds like an NDP to me. Yeah. Speaker, Canadians deserve a break. They need a break. Conservatives have been asking for a solution to give them that break, like a GST holiday on fuel or an end to the ineffective and expensive carbon tax. We've been asking for practical things to help Canadians, but the NDP Liberals keep saying no. Are there any Liberal MPs on that side who believe that Canadians deserve a break, or have they all turned into NDPers who believe the left-wing dogma that if it moves or breathes, it must be taxed?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our record is clear when it comes to supporting the most vulnerable Canadians with the cost of living. Today, we announced the implementation of a program that will provide high-speed internet at $20 a month for low-income seniors and families. We introduced the Canada Child Benefit, indexed for inflation, and lifted almost 300,000 children out of poverty. Our increases to the GIS have helped over 900,000 seniors. And from 2015, when we formed government, to 2019, we raised 1.38 million Canadians out of poverty. That's real progress for the most vulnerable, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, we're just days away from the Finance Minister's first NDP budget. NDP members have won. Unfortunately, there are no fiscally responsible Liberals left in this government. Gone are the days when a Liberal Finance Minister, like John Manley, would say taxes and spending are not a growth agenda. Mr. Speaker, what good is the Liberal Party if it is willing to sacrifice its values to achieve the NDP agenda? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, our programme is clear. Our GDP has gone up for the 8th consecutive month. We have recouped 112% of jobs lost in the pandemic, 3.4 million jobs, Mr. Speaker. And 2022 was the biggest economic trade surplus since 2008, $6.6 billion. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that the economy is booming. The Conservatives don't like it, but those are the facts. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Well, that's how an NDP speaks, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, young families are seeing their dreams of home ownership turn into a nightmare. Inflation is at a 30-year high. Everything we buy costs more. And what is the Prime Minister's priority for Thursday's budget? keeping the NDP happy with a long list of new permanent spending to keep him in office all the way until 2025. Never would Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin or John Manley have dared to sacrifice their party like that. It only took about 20 votes to buy Liberal values. Mr. Speaker, why are all Liberal MPs silent when Canadians desperately need a breath of fresh air, not new taxes? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank my colleague from the other side for reminding Canadians that we are fiscally responsible and showing how previous Liberals and current Liberals have banked on helping the most vulnerable here in Canada. We have implemented the childcare benefit, which allowed 300,000 children to leave poverty for seniors. We've supported over 900,000 seniors. And just today, Mr. Speaker, we have implemented a program to provide access for all vulnerable people. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, today the entire community of healthcare professionals is calling for a public summit on health financing. A public summit including the federal government, the premiers of Quebec, the provinces and the territories, and all partners concerned. The entire healthcare community is fed up with federal underfunding that is negotiated piecemeal and hard behind closed doors. The entire community wants a sustainable and unconditional increase in health transfers. Mr. Speaker, the experts in healthcare are the ones who care for the people. Will the government convene a public summit to finally hear them? The Honourable Minister for Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to join my colleague in order to commend all healthcare workers, especially in Quebec, that have worked very hard over the past 2 years to protect us against COVID-19. Thanks to strong collaboration between all levels of government, we have saved tens of thousands of lives, tens of billions of dollars for families and small businesses. We are very proud of this result, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to work together in order to continue moving forwards. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. General practitioners in Quebec, specialist physicians, hematologists, oncologists, nurses and other professionals of the FIQ, the professional and technical personnel of the health and social services sector, the FTQ, the CSQ, the CSN and the CSD, the PTSQ, all of them today are calling for a public summit on health financing. They're all saying that enough is enough. Ad hoc and systematically conditional contributions are unacceptable. When will a public summit be held? The Honourable Minister for Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. $63 billion. That is the investment that the government has done over the past 2 years. In support of this extraordinary work that my honourable colleague has enumerated, $63 billion to protect the health and safety of workers, with exceptional results based on what would have happened under other governments, or if we would have been in another country, not Canada. So we're very proud of our results. We look forward to working together in the months and years to come. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, new IPCC report and new alarm bells. Humanity has less than 3 years to reverse the emissions curve to maintain a sustainable world. 3 years. Current emissions must be halved by 2030. This is an emergency and the Liberal plan is simply inadequate. It relies on technology that doesn't even work and continues to pour billions upon billions into fossil fuels. Increasing fossil fuel production is not the way to go. Will the Liberals put an end to subsidies to oil companies and invest in clean energy for our children's future? The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. As he knows full well, we have committed ourselves to eliminating oil company subsidies by 2023, 2 years earlier than all our other G20 partners. Last week we announced $9.1 billion extra on top of what we're already investing throughout Canada in order to make Canada a world leader in energy transition. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, today's IPCC report tells us we are racing towards climate disaster. We know what needs to be done, we have the tools, but this government is failing to act. There is no time left to delay. But the Liberals' emissions reduction plan is far from what's needed. They continue to hand out billions of dollars to big oil and gas instead of scaling up renewables and supports for workers. The world's top scientists are clear. It's now or never. So why is this government acting like there is no emergency?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable colleague for her question. In fact, we are very seized with the emergency, which is why we presented the most ambitious, transparent, and solid climate change plan we've ever seen in this country. And don't take it from me, Mr. Speaker. Take it from Greenpeace. Take it from Équiterre. Take it from la Fédération Canadienne des Municipalités, Mr. Speaker. Take it from Andrew Weaver, IPCC scientist and Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to...
I was having trouble hearing there as well, so I'll let the minister maybe back up and re-answer that one.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was having problem hearing my own voice, Mr. Speaker. So our plan is such a good plan that organizations such as Greenpeace, the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, Équiterre...
Order. I want to be able to hear the minister's answer. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was saying that Andrew Reaver, IPCC scientist and ex-leader of the BC Green, said that with the plan we tabled last week, Canada reclaims its status as an international leader on climate change. Don't take it from me. Take it from him, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Abbotsford.
Well, Canadians are facing sky-high inflation that has led to higher grocery and gas prices and a housing affordability crisis. They want real solutions from this government. They want a plan to fight the skyrocketing cost of living that has left so many behind. Another budget with an avalanche of spending will only fuel inflation, leaving future generations with more deficits and more debt to repay. To the Minister, will her upcoming budget present a plan to fight inflation, grow our economy, and return to balanced budgets?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition is raising the issue of affordability. So let's go to the facts. Our government lowered taxes on the middle class and raised it on the wealthiest 1%. Conservatives voted against that. We created the Canada Child Benefit and indexed it to inflation. The Conservatives voted against that too. We provided seniors with 75 age and over a $500 payment last summer. They voted against that. They voted against C2. They're on track to vote against C8. Why don't they just double down on affordability and vote with us on C8?
The Honourable Member for Abbotsford.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister. Money doesn't grow on trees. Virtue signaling doesn't feed people or put gas in your car. It doesn't buy you a home. What Canada needs is a plan for growth with investments in jobs and productivity. We need a budget that has a real debt management strategy with a firm fiscal anchor and a clear path to returning to balanced budgets. So will the upcoming NDP, the SPENDP Liberal budget, include a plan to control inflation, a strategy to grow our economy, and a return to balanced budgets?
I want to be able to hear the questions and the answers here. The Honourable Minister of Families.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, what I can share with the member opposite is a real plan to grow our economy. In fact, in every province and territory across this country, families now have access to reduced childcare fees. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, if women across Canada choose to enter the workforce at the same rate as women in Quebec did 25 years ago, that's 240,000 workers in this country able to join the economy, able to grow the economy. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to fiscal responsibility and we'll do just that. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, last week the former parliamentary budget officer indicated this is not the environment in which you want to do deficit spending. The economy is in recovery, unemployment is low, and the Bank of Canada is struggling to deal with inflation that we haven't seen in 30 years. Does the Minister of Finance realize that additional spending risks making inflation worse? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Associate Minister of Finance.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'll remind Canadians and the opposition that they campaigned on deficit spending of $168 billion. Our fiscal prudent plan, which will be revealed in the budget later this week, is going to continue making investments in Canadians, but also set us on a very prudent course for the future. Our GDP is now above pre-pandemic levels. We've recovered 3.4 million jobs. We came into this crisis with the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and after investing $500 billion in Canadians, still the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7.
The Honourable Member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, I guess if everything's so good, why do we need to keep spending? The government's only answer to every problem is to spend more money, but now the chorus of warnings is growing. Just last week, Scotiabank said spending commitments undermine the government's ability to tackle inflation. Even Stephen Poloz and former Liberal Finance Minister agree that now is not the time for stimulus. For a government who claims to listen to the experts, why are they burying their heads in the sand when it comes to inflation, out-of-control spending, and affordability?
The Honourable Minister of Families.
And what the opposition clearly doesn't understand is that it's important for us to support Canadians when they need that help. Right. In fact, in 2015, we brought in the Canada Child Benefit. Fact, that party voted against it. Mr. Speaker, we also brought in universal, affordable, accessible, quality childcare across this country. And what did that opposition party say? They were going to get rid of it if they were elected. Thank goodness, Mr. Speaker, they didn't, because we've got Canadians' backs and we'll continue to do that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, food prices are rising, rent is going up, gas prices are going up, and the government does nothing. Even worse, the new NDP Liberal Alliance means that taxes went up again last Friday. That is the signature move of this new government. My question to the Finance Minister is as follows. Can she look Canadians right in the eyes and ensure that she will do what she can do as Minister for Finance to say that she will at least control expenditures to reduce inflation in Canada? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important for Canadians to look at the facts because Conservatives seem to ignore them. According to our plans, single mothers with 2 children will receive $13,600. In Saskatchewan, they will receive about $1,000 back because of the carbon fund. Students will save $3,000 because of our plans. We are here to tackle affordability, and that's what we will continue to do, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent.
Monsieur le Président, vous savez...
Mr. Speaker, in Quebec we have a great expression, having both hands on the wheel. That's a good expression that we have in Quebec, but unfortunately with the new NDP Liberal government, what do we have? Well, we have 2 drivers on the same steering wheel. So what's the result? Well, it's 2 left hands on the steering wheel pulling to the left, 2 on the right pulling to the right. That's our new governance between the NDP and the Liberals. Can the Minister for Finance at least say one thing to Canadians? We will continue expenditures. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, during this period, the Government of Canada has been here for Canadians, families, seniors, regions, the environment. Former Liberal Prime Ministers approved of this. Paul Martin, Jean Chrétien, Jean Charest, all these people approved of our measures. At the same time, the Conservatives are pushing towards the right ever more. So why do we need the Conservatives when we have Maxime Bernier who's already there for us? The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, today, the entire community of Quebec healthcare workers is joining the Bloc Québécois in demanding a public summit on healthcare funding. The women and men who care for people have been warning us for a long time about the consequences of federal underfunding, but successive governments have not listened to them. The pandemic has tragically revealed these consequences. Today, the healthcare community would like to be heard. They are calling for a public summit to discuss a massive, sustainable and unconditional increase in health transfers. My question is very simple. Does the government accept this request? The Honourable Minister for Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for giving me the generous opportunity to give a bit more information on the matter. $2 billion is the announcement that we have made. $2 billion extra and unconditional dollars for provinces and territories to reduce waiting times for surgery, treatment and diagnostics, because we know how important it is for provinces and territories to do so, but also for all those who are being treated and who are waiting. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, well, it's one thing for Ottawa to claim to know healthcare needs better than Quebec and the provinces, but that it claims to know them better than specialists, general practitioners, haematologists, oncologists, nurses, respiratory therapists, perfusionists, physiotherapists, orthotics, occupational therapists, psychologists and support staff. I could go on until tomorrow morning if you wanted, Mr. Speaker. I could enumerate all healthcare professionals who are denouncing the federal way of funding healthcare today. Will the government finally call them to a public summit to listen to and not dictate what their needs are? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And once again, I would like to sincerely thank my colleague for giving me even more time to speak. $1 billion for provinces and territories. We will be making an official announcement with all provinces and territories in order to take care of our seniors who have had such a difficult time, who have suffered a lot over the past 2 years. We know that this stress has also been a stress for all healthcare workers. They find it hard to find the resources to help our seniors, and we are very proud of this agreement. We look forward to talking about it even more. The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, today, those who speak out are the women and the men who care for people every day, every night. They ask to be listened to. They know exactly what they need. That is their job. They are not here today to play partisan politics. They are here to be invited to share their experience in a public summit on health funding. The real experts want to tell us how to care for our world properly, today and tomorrow. Why not seize their generous outstretched hand? The Honourable Minister for Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, a big thank you for giving me the opportunity to give even more information to talk about the millions of dollars for mental health, for which we already have a budget, and we look forward to be able to transfer them to provinces and territories in order to take care of people's mental health. We know how important mental health is and how much people have suffered, especially healthcare workers who have had difficulty to do their work over the past few months when it comes to physical and mental security and safety for them. So it's great news once again, another $3 billion to help provinces and territories.
The Honourable Member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, promises of housing affordability are a complete joke under this government. For example, housing prices in Toronto are up over 36%. Montreal, Vancouver up over 20%. Calgary, Ottawa up 16%. All of these urban centres are full of hardworking young people who just want to get out of their parents' basement. When will the SPENDP Liberal MPs join Conservatives and demand a real housing affordability plan that will actually help these young people, these first-time home buyers?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question. I wish the Honourable Member had a conversation with the Honourable Member from Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, who said that we should end the first-time homebuyer incentive, precisely the program that is meant to help Canadians access the dream of home ownership. He should have another conversation with a Member of Parliament from...
I'm having trouble hearing the Minister. Could we get him to start again on his answer? The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, the problem is they talk about home ownership, but every single program that we have in place to help first-time home buyers, they oppose it. They've actually said publicly, the Honourable Member from Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry wants to end the first-time home buyer incentive. The Honourable Member from Calgary Centre spoke against his opposition to the measure to put a tax on foreign non-resident home buyers. And just recently, the Honourable Member from Mission Matsui Fraser Canyon tried to table the Conservative platform in this House, which doesn't contain the words affordable housing, Mr. Speaker.
Ready? The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverbend.
Mr. Speaker, this minister continues to be obsessed by speeches given by my colleagues on this side of the House. So let me offer him another quote. Here's what the Mortgage Professionals of Canada said just last week. The government's well-intended first-time home buyers program is simply failing. Doesn't get more clear than that, Mr. Speaker. Canadians do not want to co-own their home with the government. So when will this minister scrap this failed program?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, we intend to move forward to increase housing supply. We intend to move forward with enhancing the first-time homebuyer incentive. We intend to move forward to set up a first-time homebuyer tax-free savings account to the tune of up to $40,000, and we intend to turn more Canadian renters into homeowners through an innovative and groundbreaking rent-to-own program, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Can't afford a home? Have you tried finding richer parents? That's what a billboard in Toronto read. And as sarcastic as it is, it gets your attention on the out-of-control state of our housing market. The cost of housing under this government has doubled since 2015, and Canadians who are lucky enough to own a home pay almost 50% of their income to service their mortgage.
Shame.
So does this minister have a plan for anyone without a trust fund trying to buy a house in this country, or is it just the CMHC bonuses that get his attention?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Maybe the honourable member should speak to her another colleague, the member from Simcoe North, who said that the government should not be in the business of helping Canadians access their dream of home ownership, Mr. Speaker. What kind of party is this that can't get even the story straight? One day they talk about affordable housing, but it's not in their opposition motion or their Conservative Party platform. They talk about first-time home buyers, but they voted against it. They talk about the first-time home buyer incentive program, but they speak it down all the time. They have no credibility on this issue. We will do everything possible to make sure that we make every possible Canadian have access to a safe and affordable place to go home.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, women and children are being brutally murdered in Ukraine. 300 bodies have been discovered in a mass grave in Bucha, and more civilian bodies have been found in the street. Women, children, and seniors senselessly murdered. There have been reports of sexual violence perpetrated by Russian invaders against women and children as young as 10. Evidence of war crimes and crimes against humanity are everywhere. We need to do everything we can to stand up for human rights in Ukraine and around the world. Will the government call for Russia to be removed from the United Nations Human Rights Council?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think I speak with all members of this House to express the outrage, the sadness, and the horror as we watch scenes of civilians who have been killed in Ukraine. Let me be very clear. We believe this amounts to war crimes. We believe this amounts to crimes against humanity, and we will continue to take every step possible to hold Russia accountable for these crimes. We will go to the International Criminal Court. We will go with Ukraine to the International Court of Justice. We will stand with the people of Ukraine.
The Honourable Member for Churchill, Kiwatanuk, Aski.
Mr. Speaker, while Canadians are struggling to keep up with the rising cost of groceries and housing, the 6 largest Canadian banks recorded a profit of over $5 billion in the last quarter. Yet the Liberals are doing nothing to force these corporations to pay their fair share. CEOs are lining their pockets while people are struggling to pay rent. The Liberals must make a choice, stand with the majority of Canadians or their billionaire pals. When will the Liberals make billionaires pay by implementing a 3% surtax on their excess profits?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for a question. Our government is committed to asking those who prospered during the pandemic to help a little bit more for those who did not. Our platform committed to raise corporate income taxes on the largest, most profitable banks and insurance companies and introduce a temporary Canada Recovery dividend because they have recovered faster. We are also working to implement a global minimum tax, and 136 OECD G20 framework members have already signed up.
Member for Fleetwood, Port Kells.
Mr. Speaker, Regulations act as the rule book for how businesses operate, protecting consumers, the environment, and our health and safety. But over time, regulations can accumulate, become outdated, and result in barriers to innovation and growth. Can the President of the Treasury Board update the House on how the government is modernizing our regulatory system to improve Canada's ability to attract investment and growth-oriented businesses?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you to my hardworking colleague of Fleetwood Port Kells for the question. Our regulatory system needs to be more efficient and less burdensome while maintaining protections for consumers, health, safety, and the environment. Mr. Speaker, the government tabled the second annual regulatory modernization bill. It reduces the administrative burden for businesses, simplifies overly complex rules, and let us do more online. It will support our economic recovery by helping businesses do what they do best and make it easier for Canadians to get things done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP Liberal minister can try to sidestep the economic woes this government's high tax, high inflation policies are placing on new Canadians, but they know the truth. It's why when asked why they would not recommend Canada to future immigrants, the top two reasons were current government leadership and cost of living. We are in a labour crisis, and this government's fiscal policies are not helping. Will the NDP Liberal minister fix their fiscal policy mess so that Canadians and new Canadians are not driven out?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would caution the honourable member, as she seems not to be aware of the fact that Canada has one of the best fiscal positions of any developed economy in the world. We entered this pandemic with the lowest debt to GDP ratio of any G7 country, and our AAA credit rating has been reaffirmed by major credit rating agencies. I would point out as well, Mr. Speaker, that Canada this year, for the first time, has actually ranked first globally as the world's top destination of choice for newcomers who are thinking about leaving their country of origin. The measures that we have been putting in place are making a positive difference for our economy, and we're going to continue to make Canada the most welcoming place on earth for those who wish to seek new employment opportunities.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. I'm going to repeat the question, Mr. Speaker. When newcomers were asked why they wouldn't recommend Canada as a destination to other future immigrants, 43% blame this government's leadership, Mr. Speaker, and another 35% blame the cost of living. Will the NDP Liberal Finance Minister commit to fixing her inflationary, stifling tax policy, which is such a disaster that many Canadians and even new Canadians are thinking of looking elsewhere? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's an interesting frame that the member uses when she puts it on the floor of the House of Commons. If you ask the group of workers around the world, any country that they would like to come to explore new economic opportunities, the number one choice they will make is Canada. This is something we should be extremely proud of. Canada is winning the global race for talent. The only question I constantly ask myself is how can we increase the margin by which we are winning it? We know that we've created economic conditions that has not only seen our economy rebound with more than 112% of the jobs lost during the pandemic come back, but with many job vacancies for newcomers to fill, which sustains work for them.
The Honourable Member for Mission Masqueef, Fraser Canyon.
You know, Mr. Speaker, hearing the commentary today, I think there's one thing that all British Columbians can agree on, irrespective of party, is that the Government of Canada has a role to play in helping rebuild British Columbia. So in this week's budget, can the government let us know whether there's going to be additional funds on top of the $5 billion for dike infrastructure, for road repair, for First Nations emergency management and supplies? British Columbia needs it. Will the government be there to help rebuild my province? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for an important question and for his advocacy on behalf of his constituents. Mr. Speaker, right from the beginning of the terrible floods that took place in British Columbia, we've been there working with the people of British Columbia, with the provincial government, and with local authorities as well. Mr. Speaker, we've already committed $5 billion to that rebuild, and the work is ongoing with municipalities, with the people impacted by the floods, and with the province and Indigenous communities in order to make sure the federal government will be there for the people of British Columbia.
The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, producers and processors working under the supply management sector are waiting for compensation. And there were conditions imposed. We need to protect our food sovereignty. We need to ensure that our farmers and producers are fully compensated with the implementation of CUSMA. Will Budget 2022 finally allocate funds needed to compensate supply-managed producers under CUSMA, yes or no? The Honourable Minister of Agriculture. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague is aware that we have already committed $2 billion for dairy farmers for compensation under the agreements with Europe and the Trans-Pacific area. They know the amount they will get in 2023, and our commitment for the agreement with the U.S. and Mexico is to give all the details over this first year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Avignon, Matane-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, we have 3 years to ensure a viable future for our planet. That is what the IPCC report has said this morning. 3 years to cap greenhouse gas emissions and then cut them by at least 48% by 2030. However, in the plan presented by the minister last week, there are still no targets for caps on fossil fuels, not for production nor on emissions, where he had promised to do so. We have 3 years to take action, and the minister's plan leaves us still on the drawing board. Time is running out. Will the minister get back to that drawing board? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, in my hand, I have the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Plan of Canada on page 104. 104, Mr. Speaker, if I quote the report. The minister is going to quote something that's in the plan. It's not a prop at the present. On page 104 of the plan, we can see that the oil and gas sector has projections of cuts. So this is the most ambitious in the sector. Our plan is a serious, solid plan. It will allow us to achieve our objectives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Avignon, Matane-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, what the IPCC report says is that we have 3 years to cap and then reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The UN Secretary General even said, and I quote, that investing in new fossil fuel infrastructure is morally and economically a folly, Mr. Speaker. This brings us to the new Bay du Nord oil project. This project is nothing more than folly. The minister would approve 1 billion barrels of oil over 30 years when we have only 3 years to take action. This would completely undermine the credibility in the plan presented last week. So will it be a yes or no for Bay du Nord? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would remind my honourable colleague that our plan, which is based on projections by the Energy Board, allows us to attack emissions, and I would like to quote the Secretary General of the Suzuki Foundation says this plan has the best chance of success of all previous Canada's previous plans. In Equateur, they said, finally, because we finally have a detailed strategy. It was all or nothing. The minister said all. We're working to promote the environment. I am waiting. Is everyone ready? Yes? Good.
Brandon Souris.
Speaker, in the last Parliament, the Liberals defeated or voted against the Conservative bill to introduce the carbon capture tax credit to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the NDP Liberals are agreeing with Conservatives about the technology's potential and are prepared to introduce such a tax credit themselves. Why did it take the NDP Liberals over a year to consider our proven conservative solution to this environment concern.
The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister online? Nope, nope.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister online. Okay, I'm getting...
Mr. Speaker, climate change is the greatest long-term threat of our country. It's an existential threat, and yet we know that a market mechanism and an important mechanism is climate capture, use, and storage. Important investments were made in Budget 21. We have put on the floor of the House the emissions reductions plan. It's an ambitious plan. It's an important plan, and we will continue to work with industry and all stakeholders to make sure that we get to where we need to get to save the planet and have good, long-paying jobs across the country.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the International Energy Agency has stated that carbon capture, utilization, and storage is the most near-term available technology to mitigate climate change, and deployment will amount to approximately 7% of the world's GHG reduction targets. Canada was at the forefront of developing carbon capture. Billions of dollars have been spent by industry and governments to advance the technology, making it a Canadian technology champion. Will this government commit to ensure this environmental leadership remains in Canada, or will we see more inaction that will move more jobs to the United States?
The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, to fight climate change, we need all available technologies, and that's exactly what our approach has been so far. We have, in Budget 2021, committed to put in place a tax incentive for carbon capture and storage, which is in fact featured in today's IPCC report as a technology we absolutely need to tackle climate change. We shouldn't put all our eggs in that basket. It is part of our plan. 5% of our plan rests on carbon capture and storage, but we need to invest in transit, Mr. Speaker. We need to invest in solar, in wind, in electrification. By doing all these things, we'll get to our target, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister. I don't know where I'm getting this one. The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
The Minister of Natural Resources told delegates at the IEA meeting he would be implementing a 45Q type regime to capture carbon in Canada. The American 45Q tax credit has pulled investment away from Canada because it includes enhanced oil recovery. Yet the same minister co-wrote an article saying that EOR should not be part of our carbon capture regime. So one story to people who know what's required, and another when you're pandering to special interests at home. Which side of his mouth will the minister be talking out of now, and how many more jobs do we have to lose to the United States?
Yes. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, I'm happy, in fact, that I have another opportunity to point out that the United States, in fact, is also working towards renewables and towards cleaner energy. In fact, the U.S. Secretary of Energy, Secretary Granholm, specifically said the Biden administration is aggressively investing in a wide range of clean energy technologies which will grow our economy, create good-paying jobs, lower costs for American families, and combat the climate crisis. Sound familiar? That's what we're doing right here in Canada. We are building a sustainable, clean economy for sustainable jobs for the future.
The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacour. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Prime Minister announced the government's plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 40% by 2030. Canadian farmers are on the front lines of climate change, and their actions are essential in order to achieve Canada's climate targets. The plan provides over $1 billion to the farm sector for this. Can the Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food explain to the House how the agricultural sector will benefit from under this new plan? The Honourable Minister of Agriculture. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague from Châteauguay-Lacour for her commitment to producers. They are, in fact, essential partners in our fight against climate change, and that is why our plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions provides for incentives for farmers and producers who adopt good practices, such as regarding the use of fertilizers, $100 million for fundamental and applied research and the transfer of knowledge, etc. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, so many small and medium-sized businesses in my riding of Langley-Aldergrove tell me that one of their biggest challenges is to find good workers with the skills and knowledge needed for today's economy. Now, we know that many young people and new immigrants are anxious to get to work, but if this economy cannot produce the products and the services and the workers that the economy needs, we have inflation. When will this government realize that its mismanagement of the economy is hurting so many Canadian businesses and workers?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to share with this House all the good work our government is doing to address labour shortages, whether it's attracting talent from around the world to Canada, including additional measures announced today under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. It's about investing in the next generation of workers through the Canada Student Loans and Grants Program. It's about maximizing workforce participation of workers who are in this country and ready to work. That's Indigenous youth, that's persons with disabilities. It's about investing in things like childcare and transit and housing so people can live and work and play near where they work.
Absolutely.
There's so many things we're doing, Mr. Speaker. I will need another question.
The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Just might be in luck. Mr. Speaker, Belden, a manufacturer in my riding, has been struggling with their expansion. They need 2 engineering experts from India to train Belden engineers, machine operators, and local installers. Work permits from India are taking well over a year in processing time. Belden is coming close to a standstill. Layoffs are close. Mr. Speaker, when will this NDP Liberal finally take ownership of the unacceptable processing times and stop putting Canadian businesses at risk?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there's a number of things that we've advanced to address processing times, and I would point out that chief amongst them is an $85 million investment across 5 lines of business, including work permits that were included in the economic and fiscal update, which the Conservatives continue to delay. In addition, we've hired more than 500 staff who are fully trained in producing now. We are modernizing the way we do immigration with a new digital platform. And Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to share that in the immigration levels plan that I tabled just a few months ago, we have set the most ambitious course for immigration in the history of Canada because we know it's good for the economy, it's good for jobs, and it's good for our communities.
The Honourable Member for Niagara Falls.
Mr. Speaker, on July 1st, wineries in my riding producing 100% Canadian-grown wines will now be hit with the excise tax. This is the result of this government's failure to protect the sector and the 2006 excise exemption the Conservatives provided to allow the industry to flourish. To help mitigate uncertainty, the wine industry is asking the federal government to confirm it will not apply the excise tax to wine products bottled before July 1st. Will the NDP Liberals commit to not taxing 100% Canadian-made wine products produced before July 1st?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question and value the great contribution that the wine industry makes to Canada and to the tourism sector. I can also say that for the craft beer industry, like other taxes and benefits, the alcohol excise duty rate is automatically adjusted each year due to inflation, and this is the right approach, and it provides certainty and predictability, and it's to ensure the fairness of our tax system for all Canadians. The increase is less than 1/5 of a penny per can of beer, and there are specific measures taken into consideration when it comes to the wine industry. We're going to continue to support the industry. We're going to continue to support jobs across the country, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Laval-Les-Îles.
Afghanistan is dire. For the year 2022, the United Nations estimates that 24 million people inside Afghanistan require humanitarian assistance. This represents half of the population. The rise to power of the Taliban has made the humanitarian crisis much more important, especially for women and girls who are the primary victims of the situation. Can the Minister of International Development inform this House of what Canada is doing to support the Afghan people? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister of International Development.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his strong advocacy for the Afghan people. Afghanistan is suffering from a humanitarian crisis, and this is why last week I announced that Canada is providing an additional $50 million for a total of $143 million in 2022 to help support the people of Afghanistan. This assistance will be delivered through our partners and will provide life-saving assistance such as food, nutrition, and medical support for the Afghan people, particularly for women and girls. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, across Canada, declining habitat and years of poor management have put Canada's fish stocks at risk. Coastal communities and workers are feeling these impacts firsthand. They want to be part of the solution to protect our marine ecosystems, but they're being left behind by a lack of support by this government. Instead of fighting with workers trying to make ends meet, will the minister confirm that a fair transition plan for workers across Canada's fishing industries will be part of the budget?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. Clearly, I will not be talking about what's in the budget, but what I will say is that we're very committed to growing our fish and seafood sector, which means having sustainable stocks. And so we're working on that, as well as transitions to bring more Indigenous communities into being able to satisfy their rights to fish, while working with the harvester community on this transition. So, Mr. Speaker, I'll continue to be engaging with all of the stakeholders to have the best possible way forward.
The Honourable Member for Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, I've received many emails from constituents calling for the government to support a people's vaccine. The Prime Minister had joined EU leaders to pledge that future COVID-19 vaccines developed with government support would be for the global public good and be made available, affordable, and accessible. That pledge appears abandoned. Mr. Speaker, it's unacceptable that 3 billion people are still waiting for their first vaccine. Fighting COVID abroad fights COVID here at home. It protects Canadians, small businesses, and jobs. Will Canada endorse a TRIPS waiver to permit the temporary global transfer of vaccine-making technology, as called for in a motion by the Honourable Member for Beaches, East York?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, one thing I can assure the member and this House, that Canada is doing its part to making sure that we provide vaccine for around the world. In fact, actually, I was in Senegal in Ghana, and in particularly in Ghana, where we received, where I was there, we received 300,000 doses of vaccines. We're working with our partners with the WHO and COVAX to making sure that the world gets vaccinated. Thank you.
And that's all the time for question period today. I have a point of order from the member for